Today we're going to talk about buying books. A wise man once said, when I get a little money, I buy books. When I get a little more, I buy food and clothes. So that's what we're going to look at today. 3 kinds of books that we're probably already buying and where maybe to go look the best place to save. Really, it's going to be about saving money on books, the best places to buy them to maximize your dollars. Along the way, I'm going to give you specific examples of books. So we're going to talk about books. Then we're going to be looking at 3 kinds of books, new books. That is, books that have come out in the last year or maybe 2 years. It could be even up to 5 years, but really new books. Second category of books is really modern books. So this could be something like within the past 50 years. And the third kind of book we're going to look at is antique books or vintage books, old books. We don't want to offend any of the audience. Books that are old. So we're going to look at 3 kinds of books. Let's jump right in and talk about the first types of books that or place to go when buying a book. And that is, sometimes the best place to buy a book is the only place that you can get it, which is through the publisher. So I've got some examples of publishers of books where you can get really the best deal on the book. So here is a toolkit for confessions. You see that? And this was available from RBAP, which is the Reformed Baptist Academic Press. And this is called A Toolkit for Confessions, Recovering Our Confessional Heritage. So this is one that I bought from the publisher. Another example of a publisher where you can buy books as a Christian is Solid Ground Christian Books. And they published this, by the way, not sponsored, Solid Ground Christian Books, which published the Baptist Confession of Faith and Catechism. It's not available in hardcover now, but it's going to be reprinted soon, so that's out of date, I guess, as soon as I say it. Another publisher where you can get books directly from the publisher is Baptist Standard Bearer. One that I didn't grab, actually, a publisher that Christians can look at to buy books from is Particular Baptist Press. So really, this is a niche, a type of example where you can't get the books really anywhere else. There might be some random place under a rock on the interwebs where you can find these books sold, but sometimes the best price and the best way to buy a book is directly from the publisher. So if you can discern, maybe you're having difficulty finding a book and you don't know where to get it, if you could locate the publisher, maybe try to find the publisher's website and go directly to them, and maybe you can get it directly from the publisher. Another retailer that is also a publisher in this case, is Reformation Heritage Books. The website is heritagebooks.org. So we've got Baptist Standard Bearer. You can just look that up. Solid Ground Christian Books is one. Reformed Baptist Academic Press is another one. And Reformation Heritage Books. So here's a set by Paul Washer on Recovering the Gospel, 3-volume set. And it's published by Reformation Heritage Books. The best place to buy it, most inexpensively. And the reason why this is significant is because sometimes you'll hop on some mega internet superstore to buy a book, and it'll be listed for, let's say, $35. And if you just go to the publisher themselves, perhaps they're offering a discount on the book and you can get it for much, much cheaper. So things that Reformation Heritage Books publishes, for example, a lot of times it's cheapest to go directly to them, to their retail outlet, and buy it from them. Kudos to you if you live close enough to go to their physical store. Another place that you can go to buy books. So those places, well, particularly Reformation Heritage Books, they'll sell lots of books. And the cool thing about them is I can look at a fellow Christian and say to them, yeah, buy whatever Reformation Heritage book sells. If they sell it, I don't really have to worry about whether it's going to send somebody off into some heretical deep end of the pool or something weird. There might be like a few titles that I would steer them away from as a confessional Reformed Baptist, but it's not something that they're going to make shipwreck on, probably. So Reformation Heritage Books is a great website for that. Another website that I've used a lot that I don't have an example of is Grace and Truth Books. Okay, so graceandtruthbooks.com or something like that is another retailer online that I'll use. Here's an example of a book. This is called Providence by John Piper. This one I bought from Westminster Theological Seminary Books, WTSbooks.com, and it was the cheapest there. So that's where I got it. Sometimes you can just go to christianbook.com. That's a cheaper place to get new books. So remember, right now we're talking about books that you're going to buy brand new. We're going to also look at modern books that maybe are a few years old, and you can really save a lot of money when a title is just a few years old and you can pick it up secondhand used on the internet. We'll talk about how that works here in a moment. And the last place that I would say to go to buy books, and it's probably where it's least likely to be great, is go to a local bookstore. Okay, sometimes you can score a book there that you weren't expecting. For example, here's a book called Green Lights. This is by Matthew McConaughey, and it's sort of his journals and life and whatnot. But I bought that from a local big box store. So sometimes that's the best place to buy a new book, or the cheapest. And it was the cheapest in that particular store. So next, let's talk about the second category of books, and that is modern books, but they're a few years old. And this is where you can really save a load of money. So here's the tip. Ready for the pro tip? When buying modern books that are used, let's say the quickest way to do it. There's other ways maybe that even be a little bit cheaper, but the quickest way is to find the ISBN number, which is a unique number generated for the book. Many times it's on the barcode. Lots of times it's listed on a website. So you can maybe go find the book listed on a website, find the unique ISBN number, whether it's 13 numbers long or 10 numbers long, it really doesn't matter. Here's an example on this book. It's probably not going to focus. Okay. There you can see the barcode and then the ISBN number, which is right here above my finger. Can we get it again? All right. So you can see the ISBN. So once you've got the ISBN number, you go to the website. Here's the trick, bookfinder.com. Now I've just given away my secret. It's okay. We're all going to be fighting over books on the internet now, using Bookfinder. It was interesting. I had been using Bookfinder for years to buy books. And here I went as an adult to take some college courses. And when I was talking to the counselor, they were like, now when you go to buy books, use Bookfinder and Abe Books. And it's all these sites that, as a bibliophile, that I've been using to buy books for years. So use the ISBN. And when you get that, if you can see a book was published in 2018, 2017, 2010, 2012, whatever, lots of times those books will be available used for less than $5. Not all of them. This isn't universally the case. But many times when a book is no longer popular and it shows up in a used bookstore, and what Bookfinder does is it searches all over the interwebs, like Libris, Abe Books. It searches other used outlets, bigger ones that you might be familiar with, eBay, and it'll link you up with them and show you here's a bunch of places that sell it new, here's a bunch of places that sell it used. You navigate to them. Maybe you like one retailer over the other. You can choose the retailer you want to buy it from. Maybe one has it for cheaper, so you just default to that one. And I've bought loads of books from Abe Books and Bookfinder and wherever Bookfinder sends me. So the key to modern books is get the ISBN, the unique number generated for that book, and plug it into the search bar on bookfinder.com. Search that thing up. Here's two examples really recently that I bought, both by R.C. Sproul. This one, Essential Truths of the Christian Faith. So now on this, there's a newer version of it out, which has a different ISBN. And I looked for it and it was more expensive. So I did a little shuffling around. Like, for example, another place that you can go to is just go to Abe Books. That is ABE books.com. This is, by the way, for most people in the States. Sorry. And you go to abebooks.com. You just type in Sproul and something like Essential Truths, let's say. And you can get the book, or even from there get the ISBN to plug it in Bookfinder to look around. So sometimes you can find older editions search for the ISBN for the older edition, find the older one, and it's probably going to be mostly the same content, or at least then, you have the option between an older one that's cheaper and a newer one. This is another one that I got recently. Now that's a good question. Answers to more than 300 frequently asked questions about life and faith. I'd recommend these. This one, Vodi Bakum recommends in his Family Driven Faith book. So if that's interesting to you, check this one out because his family used this. It looks good. We're going to use it sometime. Another example of a book that you could look up is Teaching Truth, Training Hearts, The Study of Catechisms in Baptist Life by Nettles. Okay, so all of those are all books that I bought used. Another place you can look for used books is if you have a local book sale, if you've got local thrift stores. We've got a few local here that we can go to, and sometimes you can find books there. So here's a book called How Should We Then Live by Francis Schaeffer. This is cool. Recently watched online, streaming, the How Should We Then Live series that Francis Schaeffer did. And man, that thing was made like 40 years ago. And it's really well done. It's really high production values for How Should We Then Live. His discussion of the rise and fall of Western culture and philosophy and Christianity, and really, really great. Another great way to look for books online, is business books. So here's a book called Start by John Acuff. And many times a business book will come out. It'll be super popular and people will talk about it. Man, it'll be on this podcast and that podcast. And you'll be like, oh, I can't live without this book. Maybe if you can just hold off. I mean, if you feel like you can hold off, maybe pick it up after a year or two, and it's going to be way cheaper because business books generally fall off the map. From my experience anyway, they fall off the map totally. When they fall off the radar, they go for a dime a dozen. So that's modern books, the best way to really get a good deal. Really, find the ISBN, plug it in, look it up, and you can get that thing used way cheap. And then just buy it from your choice of retailer. The third way to buy books, this is now going to be the ancient books, the old books, the vintage books. And one of the best ways that you can do that, let's get this one. Here's Thomas Armitage's History of the Baptists. This is a beautiful book. I mean, like, very few books like this are made today. Can you see it? Mm-hmm. There we go. Look at it. It's great. Anyway, it's Guilt. What? Thomas Armitage, History of the Baptists. Thomas Armitage, as a historian, believed in principal succession of the Baptists. So, believing that Baptist principles have always been carried on throughout history. And the way to get old books like this is if you know a specific book that you want, you might have to be very, very patient and watch eBay for it. If you're really patient and you wait a long time, you can get great deals on used books, old books on eBay. And really, that's the best place to get those kind of books. You can also use Abe Books. For example, you could probably go to A-Books right now, type in History of the Baptists by Thomas Armitage, and find copies listed there. But if it's more than you're willing to pay, if you wait for an auction, and also when you get on eBay, and this isn't going to be like an eBay tutorial, but you can go into eBay, create a search, and have eBay automatically search that search for you daily, and then notify you when something that matches that search has been listed on eBay. So if there's something very specific, very rare maybe that you're looking for that's old, a lot of these are also available and reprinted today. So you might be able to just pony up and buy a modern reprint. However, I'll segue now into this as a caveat to what I just said. And this is called Baptists and Their Doctrines by B.H. Carroll. And B.H. Carroll was a Baptist, a Baptist in the South, in Texas in particular, a leader of the Baptists there. And this is a collection of his sermons edited by his friend, J.B. Cranfill. And it's the old original sort of typeset printing of it. It's the original version of it. You can go and get a modern version of Baptists and Their Doctrines. It's got a picture of B.H. Carroll on the cover of it, but it's not the same content. It's been edited. They removed some material. I'm not a fan of stuff like that. Sometimes you can get a book that's reprinted and it's like Xeroxed or photocopied pictures of the pages. There's nothing wrong with books like that, reading books like that. You can do it. It's totally fine. And you can be happy doing it. So when you buy old books, sometimes you have to get the old one to get one that's not been meddled with. And Baptists and Their Doctrines by B.H. Carroll is one that's been meddled with, so you'd have to get the old one to get the full content. There's a whole section on the church that's been removed from the newest versions of another. This is just now an excuse to show you some cool books. Another sort of ancient Baptist classic Baptist work. This book has turned more, if you're a pedo-Baptist, don't read this book unless you want to become a Baptist, because Carson on Baptism has probably done more for converting pedo-Baptists to Baptists more than any other work that I know of. And reading, I constantly come across stories where people read Carson on Baptism and became Baptists because of his defense of immersion for believers. So, but if you're looking for Carson on Baptism, maybe you want an old copy. Another thing that you can do when searching is go on to Abe Books. Now we're gonna have some high level tactics now, okay? You can go on to Abe Books, and maybe you know the publisher of the old book that you want. So you type in the publisher. So in this case, let's give you an example of who published this. The American Baptist Publication Society. Okay, it was published in 1848. And maybe you know that. What you can do sometimes is go in, search the publisher, American Baptist Publication Society, put a maximum publication date right in there of, let's say, 1860. And then in the author line, put Carson. You may think, this is too much for me. I'm not into it. That's cool. If you're not into really finding these old, vintage, hard to get rare books, totally check out. But if you want them, this is how you can do it. Maybe somebody misspelled when they listed it the word baptism, and they wrote it baptism, right? They did it with a B. By searching with the publisher and putting a maximum publication date and putting in the author, sometimes you get misentered books, and that's a way that you can find them if you're really trying to find something rare. And I say that having found books using that method, particularly books written by J.R. Graves. I would search his publishers and found a whole bunch of books that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to find. Here's another cool one. This book is in here just because it's cool. It's called Baptists and Their Doctrines. Here's another close-up. Do you see the cover? It's great. It's glorious. It's wonderful. Right on the cover. Baptists and Their Doctrines. Showing that Baptist doctrines are scriptural doctrines. And this is a collection of sermons and essays by Baptists on Baptist doctrine. And it's one that you can't get today. Now, another place where you can get books, let's say you've done all this. Let's say you've tried it all. You tried Abe Books. You tried all the sneaky, cheeky tactics by looking through the publisher, narrowing down the publication date, looking for ways, just maybe typing the author's name in and one word in the title, really trying to maximize the result you might get from Abe Books, and you can't find it. Sometimes the only option you have is one of these sites that archives a lot of old books. And so you might just be forced to go into some of these big online old book catalogs and finding a digital copy of the book. A place, for example, that I know that I could send you to happily that houses many of these old books is monergism.com. That's monergism.com. Monergism.com. And they have archived sermons and books and lots of old good stuff. So if you have any specific questions, if I touched on something and you don't think I went into enough detail, feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer any questions, particularly on this subject when it's about buying books. I want to help you. I want you to be able to save money. And those are the places that I recommend that you go find books. Those are the ways that you can save money. And I hope you take advantage of it. Build your libraries. Fill your houses up with these tools. And don't be afraid. I'll leave you with this. If you stayed till the end, here's a golden nugget right at the very end for you. Don't be afraid to have more books than you've read, or maybe even more books than you'll ever read. I heard it discussed by one the other day. He said, beware of the man who has a small library and he's read all of his books. He probably thinks he knows it all. When I'm surrounded every day by all these books that I haven't read, maybe even books that I never will read, I guarantee you, books that I will never read. Every time I walk by that book, every time I walk by that bookcase, I'm reminded I don't know it all. I'm reminded there's more to learn. I'm reminded there's other people who have already been in places perhaps that I'm trying to get to, and it's humbling. Okay, it's humbling to have all these books. Don't be afraid to have more books than you'll read. There can be a sort of curative element to it. So with that, I hope this was helpful, and I wish you well.